In July of 2025, I left my corporate job to write fiction full time. And it's not like I rage quit my job and left kicking and screaming. I did give them a lot of time so that I could transition since I was in a managerial position. But I always knew that the corporate life wasn't for me. I wanted a family as part of my life, and I knew that that's where I would derive meaning in my life was from having a family. And after meeting my now wife in 2019, I felt a massive shift. I found someone who saw me for all of me, and she was on board with my career dreams. And even though I didn't know what that was, she was on board for me and with me to help me see through both the family and the creative life I wanted outside of this corporate world that I had kind of established myself in. And for me, having that one person who not only understood but also supported me made it a worlds easier to leave. And one thing I learned over the time is to remember that not everyone needs to understand your decision, because really the decision is not easy. Even if you feel very strongly that this is the right path for you, like I did, it took me a lot of time to actually make that action because there are practical reasons like establishing a income source outside of the day job. It's hard to leave if there's no established income source. And for me, I saved for years alongside trying different creative paths to figure out how I could eventually make income or figure out and have a good idea about who I was and what I wanted. So there are those practical things that make the action of actually making the decision, actually acting it out, that make that it difficult. But then there's also the social aspects what of what other people might think, or trying to a lot of times with the change of leaving a corporate job, there's some social structures that you find yourself in that maybe you no longer are part of or are going to be part of, and unsticking yourself from those things can be hard. So let me give you a quick rundown of the story over the past 7 years, and I'm gonna walk through the year since I left and my thoughts on it, how I got there, where I'm going, how I feel about it, and yeah, I hope you guys find it all you guys find it useful. So the past 7 years, when I first met my wife, like I said, I kind of experienced this like lifting up. Some people might say, creative awakening. I think that there are a lot of these things in your life where you kind of have this moment where you step back and you could see all of your patterns, all your behavior patterns, and everything that's going on in your life for what it is. Sometimes that could be, maybe you get fired from a job, you maybe you quit a job and you are able to kind of look at yourself. It's not really, it doesn't have to be a rock bottom moment, but it's almost like a sort of spiritual, some people call it, creative awakening, spiritual awakening. In practical terms, it's kind of like this feeling of stepping back and having this view into your life in a way that you hadn't before. And I was able to take that higher perspective and see these destructive patterns I was involved in. And my relationship with her was incredibly healthy, and it made it possible for both of us to look at ourselves honestly and grow with one another. So I found the person I wanted to build the meaning of my family life with. And that created a great stability to find what I wanted in my career. I had known for a long time. There's this word called noetics, and it's the word means having this intuition and having a feeling that that intuition is correct. So I had this sort of noetic feeling that I was not built for a corporate world, and I was built to have a sort of self-employed life. And I just needed to figure out what that thing was. Now, having that stable base allowed me to kind of experiment. I was working hard in the corporate world, but I was also engaged in this continuous path of searching through creative experiments and trying to figure out what it was that I wanted, what it was that I wanted in my life and would give me a meaningful career. Now, I find that with that experimentation, there was a lot of uncertainty. Like I knew I wanted something, but it was really hard to know because I hadn't tried many things. So in this case, I think this like sometimes I think maybe goes kind of gets lost on people, but the thinking and logical function of the human psyche is in these kind of scenarios, right? When there's a lot of uncertainty, I think is not the right function to call upon. And that's because if there's a lot of uncertainty, especially about you and your future, it's hard for current you in your current form, to plan better than you in the future, right? If you build a plan today, right now, for you over the next month, who's to say that you now knows better than you in 2 weeks? So in those moments when you really are completely lost, I think one of the approach that I take and has served successful for me has been to say, okay, I'm going to resign myself to intuition. And this is sort of something I learned from Carl Jung, that he was when he was in a state of complete uncertainty, he kind of had this sort of same revelation that he said, well, I don't know where to go, so I'm going to resign to the unconscious and let it take me where I should go. So I used intuition as a tool, and in future videos, I'll talk about how I balance my days now so that I could have the proper order, right? The balance of the this is kind of what I think of as the balance of order and chaos. To digress quickly, there's always some level of intuition and chaos that you need to keep in your life. Anyways, I think that this is right. If you have a personality type like this, right, like a sort of intuitive in Jungian terms, right, like an intuitive introvert, sort of like that's sort of the personality type that I find myself in, is just like an intuitive introvert, and I think that relying on in intuitive functions, dreams, symbols, seeing the myths and stories that call out to you as interesting, and analyzing those things could be good pointers. So I let this sort of noetic feeling pull me, and I went from a lot of different things. I tried Twitch streaming for a couple months, and I after 2 to 3 months, I found out that wasn't for me. I went to Shopify. I did sort of cryptocurrency research and tried to be an honest voice in that space, considering there's a lot of spam and scammers involved. And then I started writing on Substack, and that I felt a little more strongly towards. And then I started building a publication called the Frontier Letter, where I was writing essays about sort of technology and consciousness on the frontier. And then after I got married in 2025, I was hit with this intuition, like it was the next part of my quest to start writing fiction. And I had like had this feeling of writing fiction many different times, but I finally was hit with it like in full force. And there's this story I want to tell that Steve Jobs gave in his infamous commencement speech at Stanford. And the point that he makes is that you could really only connect the dots backwards. And he tells the story about how, he one of the core promises that Steve Jobs' biological parents made when they put him up for adoption to his adopted parents was that he needs to go to college. That was a core factor, was that they wanted him to go to college. And in fact, his story is super interesting because he originally was supposed to have a different set of adopted parents, because the contingency of the biological parents was that he was adopted by college educated people, and his adopted parents ended up not being college educated. So they made the promise that they would save up and let him go to college. But he dropped out pretty immediately. I think like within in his first year, he dropped out of college. And this was a big thing for him, right? Like that must have been a hard choice to make, not only because he had these working class parents who saved almost all of their money to put him into college, but it was just a core promise that they had made. And he said that because he left, he was able to kind of follow his his interest and see where that took him. And he said the story he tells is that he took a calligraphy course, not knowing how it would come in handy until 7 years later. All the calligraphy that he studied, or 7 years, however many years later, all the calligraphy that he studied in that class came back to him when he was building the Mac, and it helped him build a beautiful typography into the computer. Now, how much of this is a founder myth making for themselves versus truth? I don't know, but I like to think that we could take him at face value. And he makes this point that you could really only connect the dots backwards, and that you need to have faith in something when you're when you're walking through the journey of your life. And I find that to be so true, and I've seen that for myself, that like it's almost as if I kind of like to see intuition as an intelligence of itself, and maybe even an intelligence, like, right, the science fiction part of my mind thinks that it's possible that this is some like quantum entanglement future version, ideal future version of you, pulling you in a direction towards your optimal self, or towards the self in which you want to become. And this, like, I would say that's a capital S self in the Jungian terms. So I was kind of, when I followed these intuitions, it was almost as if all the dots connected backwards. Like, all the things that I had done had given me the skills to do that next thing, and I was finally driven to write fiction. And then that all of last year, that was when I almost had the noetic feeling towards the noetic feeling towards the specific craft that I would enact in my life, and that was writing science fiction. And, well, writing fiction in particular, but science fiction fantasy as sort of the genre that I would find myself in. And I just felt so strongly. And, like I said, in following these intuitions, I had a lot of dreams that pointed me towards leaving my job in 2024. And I had been preparing financially and practically, and, having these conversations for some time. And then when I was finally hit with that feeling, it was like I had this immense energy, and I finished a draft of a 160,000 word novel within 4 months. Now, that first story, while I really loved it, I saw it as more of a like practice story. And I finished that a month into leaving my job. Now, when I left my job, I was also hit with a flurry of sort of health issues that were I was hit with a surprise appendectomy, and then I had a return of all these muscle problems that I had been dealing with and monotonously working off every single day. And the journey has both been invigorating and also a struggle at the same time. Like, I have this having the certainty over what I want to do is gives me a lot of clarity, but it also has made for there's also been the parts of it that are uncertain, like what's going to happen. If what I imagine happening for me actually does happen. And all of 2025 was spent sort of navigating through and writing different stories parts of to build the skills required, and to improve the skills required in storytelling and prose writing for novels. And I wrote 3 stories last year, and then this 4th one that I'm writing now, I'm actually on the 3rd draft, getting some early feedback. I'm actually planning to try and traditionally publish this one. And I find that in a short amount of time, this is something I've always thought to myself, like, if you could work really hard and get really good at something that you hate, like, what I studied accounting in school, and the remnant goal from that was getting my CPA. This was something that I absolutely hated. It was just one of those things that was so uninteresting to me, that work getting through it, getting through some of these tasks and getting through some of the sort of the goals associated with that was just so draining. Now, that's not to say that I derive some great skills from it that I use in my personal life that have helped me. But in terms of a career, I always thought to myself, if I could get really good and get promoted and manage teams doing something that I don't really find myself interested in or don't find meaning in, how how good can I get at something that I love and find extremely meaningful? And I find that within the past year, I've gotten really good at writing and storytelling. I mean, of course, there's still a super high ceiling. There's a long way to go. I'm not saying that I'm a great writer by any means, but I am saying that I find that looking back, it I would have done it no matter how tough it may have gotten, how many times there was uncertainty that has made me struggle, however many times that I still kind of think on the uncertainty and what I left, it will always be worth it. And 10 times out of 10, I would do it, because working on something that I find meaningful trumps any money that I made before. And it makes for meaning through my entire day. And I find that a meaningful experience is one where the time goes by and you don't really even notice it going by. And it almost seems like my days are just optimized with meaning, given that I'm I'm building the family life that is going to give me meaning, and also the career that is giving me meaning as well. And at some point in the future, I'll talk about a strong synchronicity I had where I was close to giving up on quitting the corporate life. Or I was close to giving up on quitting the corporate life. I had been through this sort of creative journey trying to find my way, and I had this thought. I had this thought that went something like, maybe I should just give in and I could have the meaning in my family life. Now, it was like, I know a lot of people make that trade-off. I'm not naive about that. Like, I know a lot of people make this trade-off where they do something that lets them make enough money so that they could find meaning in their family life outside of work, which I'm not I'm not saying is an awful thing. It just, for me, I wanted meaning in both places. And there was a point where I almost, gave in on gave up on the career. But then I had this, like I said, a synchronicity that I'll talk about in the future. I might talk about in the future. And it pulled me sort of down this path where I thought I'm gonna have both. Like, I'm gonna have a life, and it's not that this is something that's impossible, right? There are some people in the culture that we admire who both have meaningful and amazing careers and also have family lives. So I want to do both, and I know that I could find a way to give both meaning, and that brought me to leaving my job and this past year, which I'm so grateful to kind of be going through this journey right now. And it's been pretty amazing, and being on the cusp of querying this next story to see if I could get traditionally published has been both exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. So if you're interested, in following along and hearing how the story plays out, if you're interested in consciousness and technology, science fiction, or you just like these videos and are interested in me and learning more about my journey, I think I'm at the beginning of something big here. And yeah, I'm excited to be here with you all. So if you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and there'll be more where that came from. All right, well, take care, everybody.